There is a quiet kind of exhaustion that many people carry, though they rarely speak of it. It is the tiredness that comes from always chasing. Chasing approval, chasing affection, chasing success, and chasing the feeling that maybe, just maybe, today the world will finally say, "You are enough." We run after people who barely turn their heads. We stretch our hearts toward places that never open their doors, and slowly, without realizing it, the spirit begins to grow weary. Because the truth is, a soul was never meant to live its life in pursuit of acceptance. A soul was meant to stand in its own light. And the longer we chase what refuses to meet us halfway, the more we feel the quiet weight of that exhaustion settling deep within our hearts. There is a heavy kind of tiredness that settles into the soul when a person spends too much of their life chasing. Not the kind of tiredness that sleep can cure, but the quiet exhaustion that comes from always reaching, always proving, always hoping that someone, somewhere, will finally see your worth. Many people wake up every morning carrying that invisible weight. They chase attention from those who barely offer it. They chase approval from voices that never seem satisfied. And in that endless pursuit, they slowly forget that their spirit was never designed to live life like a runner on an endless track. The truth is, chasing can become a habit before we even realize it. It begins in small ways. A person tries a little harder to be liked. They speak a little softer so others stay comfortable. They stretch themselves thinner and thinner, hoping that kindness, loyalty, and patience will one day be returned in equal measure. But too often, the more someone chases, the more distant the world seems to become, because when people sense desperation, they rarely move closer. They step back, leaving the one who is chasing to run even harder. Over time, something deeper begins to fade. The joy that once lived inside the heart becomes quieter. The confidence that once stood tall starts to bend. A person may still smile, still show up, still give their best, but inside there is a silent question echoing again and again. Why am I never enough? And that question can be one of the heaviest burdens a human being carries, not because it is true, but because the constant chase convinces the heart that it might be. But a life built on chasing will always leave the spirit thirsty. No amount of approval can fill a cup that is constantly being poured into the hands of others. No amount of recognition can heal a soul that has forgotten how to recognize its own worth. And so the exhaustion grows slowly and quietly until one day a person begins to realize something powerful. They begin to see that the problem was never their value. The problem was the direction of their energy. Because the moment a person stops chasing what refuses to stay, a remarkable shift begins to happen. The mind grows quieter, the heart grows stronger, the spirit begins to breathe again. Instead of running after validation, they begin to build themselves. Instead of begging for space in someone else's world, they begin to create a world within themselves that is rich with dignity, growth, and peace. And in that moment of realization, the exhaustion begins to lift. Not because life suddenly becomes easier, but because the soul finally understands that it was never meant to spend its days running after things that were not meant to walk beside it. There is a quiet strength that begins to rise within a person the moment they understand the true meaning of their own worth. It does not arrive with loud applause or sudden celebration. It comes softly, like the sunrise touching the horizon, steady and certain. For so long, many people measure their value by the attention they receive. They wait for someone to recognize their effort, to acknowledge their kindness, to finally say the words that make them feel seen. But the truth is gentle and powerful at the same time. Your worth was never something another person had the authority to grant. Too many hearts have been taught to believe that being noticed is the same as being valuable. A person waits for the message, the compliment, the invitation, the recognition. They believe that the day someone finally turns toward them with admiration will be the day their value becomes real. Yet a human spirit does not grow stronger by waiting for someone else to confirm its importance. The sun does not shine brighter because someone looks up at the sky. It shines because shining is its nature. When a person begins to understand this, something begins to shift deep inside them. They realize that the applause they were chasing was never the source of their strength. Their patience, their resilience, their compassion, their quiet endurance through difficult days, those things already carried meaning long before anyone noticed them. The world may be slow to recognize goodness, but goodness does not become greater the moment it is finally seen. There is a deep freedom in this realization. It allows a person to step out of the exhausting cycle of proving themselves again and again. They no longer feel the need to perform their value in front of others like a constant audition. Instead, they begin to live with a calm confidence that does not depend on approval. Their kindness becomes genuine rather than strategic. Their work becomes sincere rather than desperate for praise. They begin to stand firmly in who they are, even in rooms where no one applauds. And strangely enough, when a person stops seeking recognition, their presence begins to carry a different kind of weight. People can feel it, even if they cannot explain it. There is a steadiness in someone who knows their worth without asking permission. Their voice becomes calmer, their decisions become clearer, their boundaries grow stronger. They move through the world not with arrogance, but with a quiet dignity that cannot easily be shaken. Self-worth does not demand attention. It does not shout or beg to be acknowledged. It simply exists, steady and rooted, like a tree that has grown deep into the earth. Storms may pass over it, winds may shake its branches, but its roots remain firm because they are grounded in something deeper than the opinions of others. And when a person finally embraces that quiet power, they discover something remarkable. The world may notice them, or it may not, but either way, their value remains unchanged. They are no longer waiting to be seen in order to believe in themselves. They already know who they are, and that knowledge becomes a light that guides every step they take forward. There is a gentle truth that many people spend years trying to understand, and it is this: the things that are truly meant for you rarely require you to chase them with desperation. Life has a quiet rhythm to it, a natural unfolding that often goes unnoticed by those who are always running. When something belongs in your life, it tends to meet you in a place of mutual effort, mutual respect, and shared presence. It does not force you to shrink yourself, nor does it ask you to exhaust your spirit just to keep it close. Yet many people have been taught the opposite. They are told that if something matters, they must fight endlessly for it, hold on tighter, try harder, prove more. And while effort is a beautiful and necessary part of life, there is a difference between dedication and chasing something that continually moves farther away. When a person is always the one reaching out, always the one trying to hold the connection together, always the one carrying the weight, the heart begins to feel the quiet strain of imbalance. Opportunities, much like relationships, have their own natural harmony. When the time is right and the path is aligned, things begin to move with a sense of flow rather than constant resistance. This does not mean the journey is without difficulty, but it means that progress feels possible. Doors open with effort, not with endless struggle. Conversations bring clarity instead of confusion. Growth feels encouraged instead of blocked. Think of a seed planted in the right soil. It does not chase the sunlight across the sky. It simply grows toward it. The seed does not beg the rain to fall or argue with the wind to be gentle. It focuses on what it was created to do, expand its roots, rise toward the light, and become what it was meant to become. And in doing so, it naturally receives what it needs to survive and flourish. Human lives follow a similar wisdom. When a person focuses on growing, developing their character, strengthening their skills, nurturing their peace, They begin to move into spaces that align with who they are becoming. The relationships that belong in their life begin to meet them with equal care. The opportunities that match their effort begin to reveal themselves. It is not magic and it is not coincidence. It is the quiet result of becoming the person capable of holding those things with grace. Chasing, on the other hand, often pulls a person away from their own growth. Energy that could have been used to build a better life becomes scattered in pursuit of something uncertain. Days pass trying to convince someone to stay, or trying to force a door to open that simply was not meant to. And in that struggle, a person may miss the many paths that were quietly waiting for their attention. But when someone finally releases the need to chase, something remarkable happens. Their pace slows, their vision clears. They begin to notice the people who already value their presence and the opportunities that welcome their effort. Instead of running toward things that resist them, they begin walking toward places where their growth is recognized and encouraged. And in that gentle shift, life begins to feel lighter, not because everything suddenly becomes perfect, but because the soul is no longer fighting against its own path. It is simply moving forward, growing steadily, and allowing what truly belongs to arrive in its own time. There comes a moment in a person's life when they begin to notice how much of their energy has been spent looking outward. For years, they may have shaped their choices around the expectations of others. They try to say the right things, make the right impressions, and live in ways that will earn approval. They measure their worth by how they are received, how they are praised, how they are remembered when they leave the room. And while this may seem like a natural part of living in a world filled with people, it slowly pulls the spirit away from its true center. When all of your energy flows outward, your inner world begins to grow quiet in the wrong way. The mind becomes crowded with other people's opinions. The heart begins to depend on reactions that may never come. A person may look accomplished on the outside, admired even, yet feel strangely disconnected within. That is because a life spent proving yourself leaves very little time for truly knowing yourself. But something powerful begins to change when a person decides to turn their energy inward. Not in a selfish or distant way, but in a thoughtful and honest way. Instead of asking, "How can I make them see my value?" they begin asking, "How can I strengthen the person I am becoming?" The focus moves away from performance and toward growth. It moves away from pleasing everyone and toward building a life that feels truthful and steady. When energy turns inward, reflection begins to replace constant reaction. A person starts to listen to their own thoughts with patience. They notice the habits that weaken them and the ones that quietly make them stronger. They begin investing their time in learning, in healing, in developing the qualities that no applause can create. Discipline grows where distraction once lived. Clarity grows where confusion once lingered. This inward journey often feels unfamiliar at first. Many people are used to moving quickly, always responding to the outside world. But growth has a slower rhythm. It asks for stillness. It asks for honesty. It asks a person to sit with themselves long enough to understand what truly matters and what can finally be released. In that stillness, something meaningful begins to take root: peace. Peace does not arrive when the world finally approves of you. It arrives when you stop asking the world for permission to be who you are. It grows when you invest your energy into becoming wiser, calmer, and more grounded than you were yesterday. And the more a person nurtures that inner growth, the less they feel the need to prove anything at all. Interestingly, when someone begins to live this way, the world often responds differently. Not because they are trying harder, but because their presence changes. There is a steadiness in people who are building themselves from the inside out. They speak with more intention. They act with more clarity. They carry a calm confidence that does not beg for attention, but naturally earns respect. Turning your energy inward is not about withdrawing from life. It is about strengthening the foundation from which your life is lived. It is about realizing that the greatest work you will ever do is the quiet work of shaping your character, your wisdom, and your peace. And once that work begins, the need to prove yourself slowly fades away. What replaces it is something far more powerful, the quiet satisfaction of knowing that every day you are growing into a stronger, wiser, and more peaceful version of yourself. There is a quiet misunderstanding in the world that tells people they must always be moving, always striving, always chasing something ahead of them in order to grow. The world celebrates speed. It celebrates constant action and endless ambition. It praises the one who runs the fastest, climbs the quickest, and gathers the most attention along the way. But beneath all that noise lies a deeper truth that many discover only after they have grown weary from the race. Real growth often begins in stillness. Stillness is not weakness, and it is not laziness. It is the space where the mind learns to breathe again. When a person finally pauses from chasing everything around them, they begin to hear their own thoughts more clearly. The constant pressure to impress, compete, and prove begins to soften, and something quieter rises in its place. Reflection. In reflection, a person begins to see their life not as a race to be won, but as a journey meant to be understood. Patience grows in this quiet space, and patience is a kind of strength that cannot be rushed into existence. It is built slowly, the way mountains are shaped by time and weather. When someone learns patience, they stop demanding immediate answers from life. They understand that meaningful things take time to form. Character, wisdom, trust, and peace do not appear overnight. They grow through seasons of waiting, learning, and sometimes even through seasons of uncertainty. In stillness, a person also begins to rebuild something many people lose along the way: self-respect. When you are constantly chasing approval, it becomes easy to forget your own boundaries. You begin to bend yourself into shapes that make others comfortable. You say yes when your heart wants to say no. You remain in places that drain you simply because you fear losing connection. But when you step into stillness, you begin to recognize your own value again. You start to understand that your peace deserves protection. Self-respect changes the way a person walks through the world. It teaches them that not every door needs to be knocked on, and not every opportunity needs to be chased. Some paths are simply not meant for them, and that realization no longer feels like failure. Instead, it feels like clarity. They begin to choose their direction with intention rather than desperation. Stillness also allows healing to take place. A person who is always running rarely has time to notice the quiet wounds carried within them. Disappointment, rejection, and exhaustion may sit deep inside the heart, waiting to be acknowledged. In moments of reflection, those wounds finally receive attention, and with attention comes understanding. With understanding comes the possibility of growth. Over time, this quiet practice of patience, reflection, and self-respect builds a strength that chasing could never create. It is a calm strength, steady and rooted. It does not depend on applause or recognition. It simply exists within the person who has taken the time to understand themselves and protect their peace. And when that kind of strength begins to grow, the need to rush through life slowly fades. A person moves with more intention, more wisdom, and more grace. They no longer feel pressured to chase every opportunity or every person who passes by. Instead, they stand firmly in who they are becoming, trusting that true growth is not found in endless pursuit, but in the quiet power of becoming whole within themselves. There are moments in life when the heart must learn one of its most difficult lessons, the lesson of letting go, not because love was never real, and not because the memories carry no meaning, but because holding on has begun to ask too much of your spirit. There are relationships, places, and situations that slowly turn into quiet battles where you find yourself fighting just to be noticed, just to be valued, just to feel like you belong. And the longer that struggle continues, the more a person begins to lose pieces of themselves without even realizing it. Many people stay in these spaces far longer than they should. They stay because they believe patience will eventually change everything. They stay because they remember how things once felt, and they hope those moments might return. They stay because letting go can feel like admitting defeat. But the truth is, there is a difference between loyalty and self-abandonment. Loyalty nourishes the soul, while self-abandonment slowly drains it. When a person constantly has to beg for attention, ask for respect, or prove their importance again and again, something inside them begins to bend. They may try harder, give more, speak more gently, forgive more quickly, all in the hope that their effort will finally be enough. But a heart should never have to plead for the very things that make a relationship meaningful. Respect should not require persuasion. Care should not feel like a negotiation. Letting go in these moments is not an act of bitterness, it is an act of courage. It takes strength to step away from what once mattered deeply. It takes honesty to admit that some connections survive only when one person carries the entire weight. And it takes dignity to recognize that your presence should never have to be begged into someone else's life. The fear that often holds people back is the fear of losing themselves in the process. They worry that walking away means losing the love they once gave, the kindness they once offered, the hope they once carried. But letting go does not erase who you are. In many ways, it protects the very parts of you that deserve to remain whole. Your kindness does not disappear simply because someone failed to value it. Your loyalty does not lose its meaning simply because it was given to the wrong place. What truly disappears when you let go is the constant strain of trying to earn what should have been freely given. The endless wondering, the quiet disappointment, the emotional exhaustion that follows you through your days, those burdens begin to lift. In their place comes something quieter but far more powerful: dignity. Dignity allows a person to walk away with their spirit intact. It allows them to remember the good without chaining themselves to the pain. It allows them to choose peace over endless persuasion. And once that choice is made, something remarkable begins to happen. The person who once felt small in someone else's world begins to feel whole again in their own. Because letting go is not about losing yourself. It is about refusing to lose yourself any longer. It is the quiet declaration that your heart deserves spaces where it is welcomed, not tolerated, valued, not questioned. And when a person finally embraces that truth, they do not walk away empty-handed. They walk away carrying their dignity, their peace, and the strength to grow into a life where their presence is no longer something they must beg the world to see. There is a quiet moment of awakening that comes to many people after years of searching. It is the moment when they begin to realize that much of their life has been spent looking for something outside themselves, someone to understand them, someone to appreciate them, someone to offer the love and respect they have always hoped to receive. They search in friendships, in relationships, in places and achievements, believing that somewhere out there is the person or the moment that will finally make them feel complete. And for a long time, that search feels necessary, almost natural, because every human heart longs to be seen and valued. But the longer a person searches, the more they begin to notice a strange pattern. Even when they find moments of recognition or affection, the feeling does not always last. Praise fades, attention shifts, and relationships change with time. The comfort they hoped would settle permanently in their heart often slips away again, leaving them quietly wondering why the fulfillment they chased never seems to stay. It is not because they are unworthy of love or appreciation. It is because they have been searching for something that was never meant to live entirely in the hands of others. Slowly, with experience and reflection, A deeper understanding begins to grow. A person begins to see that the love they were seeking must first exist within their own spirit. The respect they hoped others would give them must begin with the way they treat themselves. The validation they long to hear from outside voices must be spoken gently inside their own mind. Until that foundation exists, every compliment will feel temporary, and every relationship will carry the quiet fear of loss. Learning to give yourself what you once begged from the world is not an easy journey. It requires honesty. A person must face the ways they may have doubted themselves, the moments they accepted less than they deserved, the times they placed their worth in someone else's opinion. But within that honesty lies the beginning of real strength. Instead of searching endlessly for someone to complete them, they begin the work of understanding themselves. They start to notice their own resilience, the quiet courage that carried them through difficult days. They recognize the kindness they offer to others and begin learning to offer that same kindness to themselves. They learn to forgive their own mistakes rather than allowing those mistakes to define their identity. Piece by piece, they rebuild a relationship with themselves that is grounded in patience and respect. And something beautiful begins to happen during this process. The emptiness that once pushed them to chase validation slowly begins to fade. In its place grows a sense of quiet completeness. They no longer feel the urgent need to be chosen by everyone around them. They understand that being true to themselves matters far more than being accepted by every passing voice. This change does not make a person distant from others. In fact, it often deepens their ability to connect. When someone carries their own sense of worth, they enter relationships with openness rather than desperation. They give love freely rather than offering it as a trade for approval. Their presence becomes calmer, steadier, and more genuine. In the end, they discover something they once spent years searching for. The person they were hoping to find, the one who would understand them, respect them, and believe in them, was quietly waiting within them all along. And when they finally become that person for themselves, the world begins to feel like a very different place. Growth has a quiet way of changing the world around you, often without announcing itself. It does not arrive with a loud declaration or a sudden transformation that everyone can see overnight. Instead, it begins deep within the way you think, the way you speak, and the way you carry yourself through ordinary moments. At first, the changes may seem small. You react more calmly to things that once disturbed you. You become more thoughtful about where you place your time and energy. You begin to notice that not every opinion deserves a response, and not every path deserves your attention. As this inner change begins to take root, the world around you slowly begins to shift as well. People who once misunderstood your quiet strength may begin to see it more clearly. Opportunities that once seemed distant begin to feel more reachable, not because the world has suddenly become easier, but because you are no longer standing in the same place you once did. Growth changes the way you approach life, and in doing so, it changes the kinds of doors that begin to open before you. When a person grows, their standards grow with them. They begin to recognize the difference between what truly nourishes their spirit and what merely drains their energy. Conversations that once felt normal may now feel empty. Situations that once demanded their attention may no longer hold the same importance. This does not happen out of arrogance or judgment. It happens because growth sharpens awareness. A person begins to see more clearly what aligns with their values and what quietly pulls them away from their peace. With that awareness comes a new kind of choice. Instead of chasing every opportunity or every connection, they begin to move with intention. They invest their time in places where respect is mutual. They welcome friendships that are built on understanding rather than convenience. They pursue opportunities that challenge them to grow rather than simply impress others. Their life becomes less about proving something and more about building something meaningful. And as this shift continues, the people who walk beside them often begin to change as well. Those who value growth, honesty, and purpose tend to remain close. These are the individuals who recognize the quiet work being done beneath the surface. They encourage it, support it, and grow alongside it. Meanwhile, those who were comfortable with the older version of that person may slowly drift away, not out of conflict, but because growth naturally moves a person into different spaces. This change can sometimes feel surprising, even unsettling at first. A person may look around and realize that the world they once knew no longer feels the same. But with time, they begin to see that this transformation is not something to fear. It is simply the natural result of becoming someone stronger, wiser, and more self-aware than they were before. And perhaps the most beautiful part of growth is the peace that begins to accompany it. The mind becomes less crowded with comparison and doubt. The heart becomes less desperate for approval. A person learns to walk through life with steadier steps, trusting their journey rather than constantly questioning it. In the end, growth does not only change who you are, it gently reshapes the world you live in. The paths you walk, the people you meet, and the opportunities you embrace begin to reflect the person you are becoming. And as that person continues to grow, the world continues to open in ways that once seemed impossible. There comes a time in every life when a person must decide how they will walk through the world. For many years, people move quickly, almost restlessly, chasing opportunities, chasing approval, chasing the feeling that they must constantly prove their place among others. Their steps become hurried, their thoughts crowded with the fear of being left behind. They move not from a place of peace, but from a place of urgency, as though life is something that must be captured before it disappears. But wisdom begins to change that pace. With time, experience, and reflection, a person starts to understand that dignity cannot live in desperation. The more desperately someone tries to hold on to people, attention, or recognition, the more fragile their sense of self begins to feel. It is difficult to walk with confidence while constantly looking over your shoulder, wondering if someone is still following or still watching. Grace enters a person's life when they learn to release that urgency. Grace is not about moving slowly or withdrawing from the world. It is about moving with intention. It is the quiet strength of someone who no longer feels the need to rush into every opportunity or force every connection to remain. They understand that what truly belongs in their life will not require them to abandon their self-respect. Walking with grace means carrying yourself with calm certainty, even when life feels uncertain. It means speaking with honesty without needing to raise your voice. It means knowing when to step forward with courage and when to step away with dignity. Grace allows a person to leave situations that no longer honor them without bitterness, and to accept new opportunities without arrogance. Power, in this sense, does not look the way many people expect it to. It is not loud or demanding. True power is quiet. It lives in the steady way a person holds their values, even when the world around them tries to shake them. It appears in the patience of someone who chooses growth over quick recognition. It reveals itself in the discipline of a person who continues building their life even when no one is watching. When grace and power begin to walk together within a person, something remarkable happens. Their presence changes. They no longer feel the need to convince others of their worth. They no longer feel pressured to chase every passing opportunity or respond to every opinion. Instead, they move with a calm confidence that comes from understanding who they are and where they are going. This way of living creates a different kind of freedom. The mind becomes lighter because it is no longer tangled in endless comparisons. The heart becomes steadier because it no longer depends on constant validation. A person begins to trust their path, even when the road ahead is not perfectly clear. Walking forward with grace and power means accepting that life will always contain uncertainty, change, and moments of challenge. Yet it also means trusting that your character, your patience, and your growth will guide you through those moments with strength. You stop chasing the world for permission to exist and instead begin living in a way that quietly reflects your worth. And as you continue moving forward in that spirit, something beautiful unfolds. You realize that life was never about running fast enough to catch everything. It was about walking steadily enough to become the person you were always meant to be, someone who moves through the world with dignity in their heart and quiet strength in every step they take.